and welcome to our today's Coffee and Consulting. I hope you all had a nice weekend and started well in the new week. My name is Friederike Ruch and I'm the one allowed today to go or to have the Coffee and Consulting event with you. I hope you also grabbed already your coffee and so that we can join, or you can join with the coffee, our today's Coffee and Consulting event. Today's topic is about rules expiring soon. I don't know whether you already had thought about what happens after COVID and what will be the regulations or rules then also, or how would people coming back to the office and how many people will come back to the office. Some companies have thought about that most likely post-pandemic, not everybody will come back to the office, but maybe just 80% of the staff. So I don't know what your thoughts are about this, or what your company would like to introduce as new rules. Before we start, on the right-hand side, there are two boxes which are actually the most important ones for today. The first one is about questions. So please write down any questions you have. Maybe you already came to today's event with some questions concerning that topic. Please write them down because then we will answer them after the presentation. The presentation itself will be the first 15 to 20 minutes, and then afterwards we have plenty of time to answer your questions. And the second one is also on the right hand side. There is a box where you can find today's slide. So please download them so that you have them also for your future documentation. The topic about home office and is something which we or all the companies had to look at now during the pandemic situation, what you would like to do, that people, how many days people can stay at home. Now, definitely during the last couple of months, there was an obligation that everybody needs to stay at home and works at home, at least in all the jobs and professions where there was a possibility. However, if you have people not living in Switzerland but living abroad, you also need to consider all the legal aspects in the other country, so in their residence country, to see whether that had any kind of implications. If we look at, and that is what we today will just look at, if the employer is in Switzerland, the usual work location is in Switzerland, but the residence country of the employee is abroad. What do we have to look at, or better to say, what do we have to consider and review and think about for the future, for post-COVID pandemic? What kind of regulations do we have to put in place in order to make sure that all the risks there are have been at least looked at and have been minimized as best as possible? At the moment, all these people currently having their residence country abroad and working in their home office abroad, we do have in regard to social security and income tax, at least mutual agreements in place, which should expire or will expire most likely on the 30th of June 2021. There is a likelihood that it will be extended. However, there is no guarantee on it, and we most likely should know during the month of June then whether that will be extended for a further period or not. At the moment, there's a tendency that at least for another month to 2 months it might be extended, but seeing that in other countries as well, all these regulations are currently are waived and lifted, and countries thinking that it's getting now easier with people also more and more being vaccinated. Might be that really on the 30th of June, the mutual agreements are actually expiring, and then we have to look what we do afterwards. The mutual agreements in place in regard to social security as well as income tax are with Austria, France, Germany, Italy, and Liechtenstein. So with all the other countries, we don't have similar agreements in place. However, Switzerland has, with the other EU member states, indicated that they will deal with it the same way in regard to social security as they dealing it with those countries where there is a mutual agreement in place. Meaning if somebody is working from home, because there is that obligation to work from home, and is currently living in Germany, then it will not be viewed as German working days. From a social security perspective, the individual can remain subject to social security in Switzerland without any problems, and also without the consideration of the 25% provision. In regard to income tax, it's the same understanding. It is that as long the regulation is as it was before the pandemic. So if there was a normal cross-border employee working every day in Switzerland, and if that person had or is living in Germany, then in Switzerland still the 4.5% needs to be deducted, and the individual has to file the tax return then in Germany like he did before. Now, the facts we have to look at, and we currently already had during COVID-19, with just a bit of not really doing most likely a lot of changes, but the factors we have to look at is about the employment contract, the labor law requirements. We have to see what are the regulation and what do we have to do in regard to social security. Income tax is one of the things we have to look at. Above all, if somebody is working in the residence country, then usually then the situation is that the income taxation will also take place for the physical present day in the residence country. The residence country can tax that. The factor or the risk about permanent establishment has to be looked at. Compensation is something you need to find an answer to what you will do. Immigration, and then clearly our advice would be to put everything down in a kind of home office policy. You most likely have already one in place now for the current period, but now looking at the post-pandemic situation, would you like to, what would your regulations will be, or better to say, how would you like to do business then in future? And that is exactly now what we have put down on that slide. You need to define your general rules, how you would like to have home office requirements or the eligibility of home office for your staff. I just had this morning a discussion about it, whether a company can actually say, we're not allowing home office at all. In principle, yes, you definitely can say that, and you can definitely say your rule is no home office requirements at all, or you say only a cross-border employee is allowed to have home office, and then also have the restriction about the number of days. We'll come back to that in a second, because you had that topic basically also just before COVID-19. It is now just that people have realized how easy it is to work from home. Some definitely are so very keen and looking so much forward to go back to the office and meet their colleagues again. However, as a company or as HR, we also will see that there's more and more people will ask whether they cannot still have maybe 1, 2, or 3 days working from home. Therefore, it definitely makes sense that you use the time now to make up your mind and put down your regulation or your rules and your way of understanding how all home office usage should be now after COVID. What you will need to do is checking on the legal aspects, and we will look at that in a second about the various legal aspects you need to find an answer to. And there as well, there is not really a no-go factor. It's just that in case you do need to, for example, implement a payroll in the residence country or so, it just is connected with additional cost, and you need to see in the end what will be really relevant for you, or whether you think, yes, the cost is actually fair, and it is more important for us that the people are happy and are motivated to work. So we are okay with having additional cost to that. So in principle, you definitely need to check on the legal aspects, and then what you will need to do in future as well is to look at each employee separately and see each situation, check whether how the various factors are, and then see what kind of solution basically you can offer. Certainly, most of the employers or most of the companies would like to have a situation with home office where there are no additional costs. Now, what we definitely have learned in compliance is that if you want to be 100% compliant, that is always associated with costs, and there's nothing you can get for free. The legal aspects, we think you need to review and definitely find a decision we have put down here on that slides. And what might be helpful is if you look at your staff and the population, if you first look at or to define categories, like whether you have the matter about home office abroad just for cross-border employees, or you also have these international weekly commuters. And maybe you also have the topic about home office abroad for people just wanting to spend 2 or 3 months to work in a different country, which is then more like a remote working on a short time basis. We see from all the questions we receive in practice that A lot of employees would like to work from somewhere else, seeing as well that technically there's no problem at all. However, from a legal perspective, that is not that easy to do. And therefore, companies then also tend, because of seeing then as well what the cost and the administration is behind it, that just working from any random country, that might not be a solution for the future. However, that companies also tend to see that not 100% of their staff will return to the office then, let's say after 1st of June, when the home office obligation is lifted. Maybe some of you as well think about that only during next year people will return 100% back to the office. I had lots of clients and their tendency is that maybe 60% up to 80% will return to the office really, and the rest will work from home. Meaning as well, there might be models like an employee will work for 1 week in the office and the other week from home or something like this. So the flexibility is something the employees will definitely ask for. If everything will be within Switzerland and if the employer is in Switzerland, then there's no problem at all. There's not really much, at least from a legal perspective, you have to look at, except the matter about how someone will work from home, meaning as well data protection or confidentiality about documents and the computer and the technical matters. However, if we have now somebody residing abroad, then there are a couple of matters to be looked at. One thing is, in principle, the employment contract can remain as it is. There's no real need to change there anything. But it would be good to at least put down, if somebody asks for home office, to put down a paragraph or an addendum to the contract that you as an employer allow that, as well as what the legal consequences will be. But also there's a possibility that you just have a home office regulation or policy in place and you just have a letter saying that that home office policy has to be considered and the employee has to take care that he is meeting all the requirements and the conditions. As that home office or working in the home office is not just for a short period, it most likely will be for a longer term. You will have to look at mandatory legal provisions in the country of residency, whether there's anything you need to look at. One thing is clearly in regard to the bank holidays, that someone is not allowed or is able to work on bank holidays. And then also there, depending on the number of days somebody is working from home, you may have to look at things like the work hours. Also, if that is taken over a longer period, there might be other implications. In regard to Social Security, we are basically within the EU or within the EFTA region, we are back to that 25% provision, meaning that someone can only work for up to 25% in the residence country in order to remain subject to Social Security in Switzerland and not fall back to the Social Security in the residence country. And that is definitely something, as an employer, I would like to make sure that whenever possible, I will not have to take care of the social security implications from the residence country. Because if looking now at Switzerland, and if you only see that you may have people working and living in Germany, Italy, France, Austria, and maybe Liechtenstein, so you would have to have then 5 different social security systems to trying to comply with them, as well as to have all these regulations in place plus the Swiss one, and to make sure in the end that everybody is dealt with in the right way. Now, if the EU agreement is not coming or has not to be considered, as well as the EFTA regulation, so meaning, for example, you have an American living on the border in Germany, being today a cross-border employee. Currently, because of COVID-19, he had to work from home. Everything is good. However, after the mutual agreement, that person will be subject to Social Security on the days he is working in Germany. So in the end, you would have to split up the Social Security in both locations. So for those people, you definitely would like to avoid that someone is getting subject to a Social Security system where you will have to basically find a payroll or a provider helping you with it. However, what we also recommend is that definitely you will see that you put down a regulation for whom you will allow it, as well as indicating in case like the EU agreement regulation can't be considered any longer and is not in place any longer, that for those people, they then you know exactly what needs to be done, as well as the employee know that they will not be any longer subject to Swiss Social Security, but to the Social Security system abroad. In regard to income tax, you should put down a provision how income taxation will be, what will happen if somebody is working from home, and basically that are the implications as they had been before. Also making sure that for those people where you allow the home office abroad, that you say, okay, all of those have to also provide you with a kind of calendar indicating for each day where they had been, so that you have on your side done everything to make sure you are compliant as best as possible. And if somebody is working in the residence country and you currently are just deducting the tax at source, then basically for the days somebody is working in the residence country and not in Switzerland, then you will have to split up the tax at source. You also will have to look at the permanent establishment risk and reviewing based on job position, management position, whether that is any risk at all, or looking at the tasks and everything, there is no risk. But it is something you need to address and definitely look at, as you as a company don't want to have any corporate tax issues in the end in the country of residence on top of everything else. Compensation may be an issue. Now looking at Switzerland and seeing that from a Swiss point of view, definitely we are on the higher end of compensation. This might not be a big matter to look at. However, there is you may be aware of the new regulation within the EU that they say assignments for a period longer than 18 months, there you will need to consider also the compensation details of the country, of the host country. Meaning if you have somebody going to Germany on assignment, then, and in Germany there is, for example, that you pay a holiday allowance, you pay a 13th and a 14th salary, you need to actually do the same thing as well for the employees on assignment. There is a discussion currently going that for people being on a working from home on this in a home office for a longer term, this might have an influence as well. So there might be some adjustments you have to look at. You also need to see and find a regulation about the expenses, what you will do and how you will reimburse additional costs regarding the home office. From an immigration perspective, usually if you look at those cross-border commuters or cross-border workers, usually they have a residency in that country, and based on that, they are most likely just be allowed to work. You will have to look, however, whether there's anything specifically you need to do and whether there is, for example, the posted worker notification to be done, because they are now working on a kind of assignment. If it's just a cross-border working from home, then there should be no problem at all, and there should be also no posted worker notification. However, we had two scenarios where in the end, and that was in Austria, the Austrian authority asked us or requested in the end that we do the posted worker notification for the employees, even they had been just working from home as and that was their main residence, meaning because the family was living there. You also will have to look at the data protection regulations and to see that you comply with any regulation there is in the country of residence. And the last point is that we think that it most likely will be the best to just put down all the various aspects in a kind of home office policy past COVID pandemic, so that for future you have there all the regulations and all the provisions, and the employees also can just look at that and then know exactly what to do. These were in short, the overview about the rules expiring soon and what we think you need to look at or think about. We now have received a couple of questions, and I will see that I can answer them as best as possible. The first question is, we had to adjust all working days for Grenzgänger, for cross-borders from Austria for the income tax calculation. We have been informed that there is no agreement with Austria in place for tax income calculation during COVID. Any comments from your side? As with Austria, there are no cross-border commuters as such, because the regulation for cross-border workers had been already waived. I think it's a year ago or 2 years ago. So the regulation in place with Austria is that if somebody had been working before completely in Switzerland, but based on COVID-19 was actually then leaving Switzerland, going back to the main residency in Austria because the family was living there, then still at least in the two cantons we had the situation, Switzerland was allowed to tax it, and Austria was taking that out the income and was just taxing the rest of the income. However, it is true that there are in Austria, in the different regions, are different regulations in place. It's a bit like in Switzerland with the different cantons. If you would like to have some more information about it, we can definitely discuss it. Then just give me a call and we can discuss the situation. The next question is about how critical is the permanent establishment risk for home workers? The answer is it depends. It depends a bit on the country and the management position. In France, for example, they are very keen on the permanent establishment risk, and as soon as you have somebody in the upper management, then definitely you will need to look at that, whether there is any risk at all. If you have just kind of an administrative employee, not really being able to make any decisions for the company itself, then there is no risk at all. So it's a bit depending on the level of the position and the tasks the employee is doing. The next question is about the total number of days working from abroad. This includes home office days and also days at customer site abroad to calculate the 25%. Yes, that is true. It's in the end all the days somebody spends in the residence country working, and it doesn't matter whether it's home office days or any other days. It's also including days he may work for a different employer or for somebody else. Those days will also be included in the calculation. Now, what will happen is that as long as we have the mutual agreement in place, those days will be taken out, and only then afterwards the 25% will be considered. And this is now also the next question. Will the 25% be counted again from 1st of July? Yes. Presumably, as of 30th of June, the mutual agreements will be done, and then afterwards will expire. Then as of 1st of July, the new regulation will be in place, or better to say the old regulations are in place, and only any day after 1st of July will be looked or counted towards the 25%. Up to the 30th of June, the 25% provision is kind of silent, is not has not to be considered. It's really only after the mutual agreements expire. So I hope I answered all your questions you had for this webinar. If not, we're happy to still answer them also afterwards. Then just drop us an email and we will get back to you. The last 2 minutes, I would just like to quickly point out the next couple of things. The next webinar, or better to say seminar, will be about business travelers. It will be on the 16th of June, and in case you're interested, we would be happy to meet you there. Our journal, which will coming soon, we're still getting it finalized, and as soon as the journal is finished and will be sent it out, we definitely will let you know. And the last point, the next webinar will be on the 8th of June about management transfer, and all the legal aspects about it. So in case that is a topic you need more information about, then we're happy to meet you there as well. I hope you enjoyed the today Coffee and Consulting, and I'm happy to meet you anytime soon. Take care.